October has been a goddamn year. Or, at the very least, it certainly feels like it, right? I mean, a lot has happened. Let's just take a quick roll call of some of the events that have happened in the last 3 weeks, or at least in the last 3 weeks since I started filming on October 13th. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died. Republicans visibly and unabashedly abandoned the Supreme Court precedent they set in 2016. The president's tax returns show that he paid a whopping maximum of $750 per year in taxes over the last decade, and that he is deeply over-leveraged in debt. The nightmare of a presidential debate happened? President Trump tested positive for COVID. The president held a campaign event from the balcony of the White House, violating both long-standing norms and federal law. The vice presidential debate happened and garnered a whole lot of buzz. A militia group conspired to assassinate Michigan's governor, and in response, President Trump reiterated statements consistent with their mobilizing purpose. A New York Post story dropped regarding Hunter Biden's emails. It's been a lot. When you heard about these events, especially in contexts where people were mulling over how they might affect the election, you might have also come across the term October surprise. Examples being, will this story be an October surprise? Is this another October surprise? Please God, oh, won't you just stop with all the October surprises? So today we're going to talk about the idea of an October surprise, what they are, and what effects they have, if any, on elections. Also, if you guys stick around towards the end of the video, I'll give you the patented surefire technique that most political scientists use to make sense and get through them all. Alright, so let's start off by answering just what an October surprise supposedly is. In the United States, federal elections are administered by the states, but the dates that the states administrate cannot deviate from the date that Congress legislates. Basically, states decide the how and Congress decides the when, and the when has been, quote, the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November since 1845 for presidential elections, 1872 for lower house elections, and 1914 for senatorial elections. The problems with having books as props is that sometimes they fall. At latest, then, elections happen in the second week of November, meaning that October is the final stretch of the contest. So October is basically the last chance for voters to change their minds, or for campaigns to try to change their minds before their ballots are cast. The term was originally coined by Reagan campaign manager and future CIA director Bill Casey during the 1980 election. At the time, then-President Jimmy Carter was in a tight race against challenger Ronald Reagan, and a salient issue was the fact that 52 Americans had been kept hostage by a group of Iranian students for over a year. The idea that the hostages could be freed so close to the election, either by coincidence or due to military action spearheaded by President Carter, worried Casey and other Republicans, since such a thing would be a surprise in October that could cause the race to break in Carter's favor. The term also refers to a conspiracy theory that members of the Reagan campaign actively interfered to keep the hostages, hostage until the election had concluded. This to presumably thwart any possible boost that Carter would otherwise get from the hostages being freed. That whole thing is worth another video all in itself because of all the twists and the turns that the story takes, but let's just leave it at that for the current purposes of the term's etymological roots. Although the term was coined in the 1980s, that wasn't the first time a late-breaking event was suspected of causing a last-minute swing in electoral fortunes. You arguably had surprises in 1972, 1968, and even in 1800. That last one some of you may recognize was caused by none other than Alexander Hamilton. Some have argued that in 2016, then FBI Director James Comey's decision to publicly announce a partial reopening to the Clinton email investigation acted as an October surprise, as it happened on October 28th, and yeah, boy was it surprising. And there is some evidence consistent with the idea that this had an impact on the election. The story was huge national news, and most of the late deciders post-Comey swung for Trump. There's no ironclad case of a huge effect, but a small to moderate one definitely sounds plausible. This fact makes it seem like October surprises tend to have noticeable impacts on elections. And while they certainly can, like literally everything else in the social science, the actual relationship is, well, complicated. See, by their very nature, October surprises are, wait for it, surprising. They are highly idiosyncratic events, which means they often don't repeat. This makes it easy to make narratives where the event was pivotal, but also makes it pretty hard to test empirically whether it was or wasn't. And that's not to say that we can't determine causality from singular events. Qualitative social scientists do so all the time. But these surprises are often also marred by a lot of confusion and less than adequate paper trails, making it difficult even for them to trace lines of causality. And part of what makes it even more difficult to say whether an event mattered is because sometimes superficially similar events happen and they don't move the needle at all. Clinton email story possibly cost her the election. Biden email story hardly matters at all. I see you down in the comments. Don't worry. I'll get to that in a second. And it also seems impossible in the moment to determine if a story will be an October surprise. President Trump getting COVID after months of downplaying the risk of the virus certainly seems like a perfect candidate, but the polls seem to have all just taken a collective shrug at the event. This is because a lot of things need to happen for an event to become an October surprise. An event needs to happen, and mainstream outlets need to pick up on that event. The coverage needs to be popular and deemed credible. It has to be framed in a way that links it to the election, people have to accept that framing, and then they have to be open for that information to change their minds. That last point is especially important because even if we can be pretty sure that something has the potential to cause some kind of effect, there are lots of structural factors limiting their effectiveness. Just to name a few factors off the top of my head, partisanship is one because it makes it difficult to get people to change their minds as they often view the world through the lens of their partisanship. Undecided voters tend to be a smaller proportion of the population than a lot of people give it credit for, and they often tend to be politically unengaged. So even if there's this massive event that could cause a seismic shift in the event, the kinds of people who are open to having their minds changed are probably also the ones who never even heard of the event in the first place. Then there's the fact that the window for when an October surprise can happen has been getting smaller and smaller as states have been expanding their early voting periods earlier and earlier into October. It's difficult for an event in late October to matter to somebody in terms of changing their mind if they've already casted their vote in the middle of the month. When you aggregate all the evidence on the topic, the most accurate way to think about it is this. October surprises as a class of things are real and can have modest effects, less in some contexts, but more in others. But it's also just about impossible to forecast what events will have an effect in the future, and even if an event happening now will have an effect either. And when it comes to thinking about how it'll affect this election, 2020, more generally, the story of this cycle has been one of chaos and instability in the news, but also stability in public opinion. I'm not going to say that October surprises are impossible at this point, but it'd be even more surprising than usual if one were to occur and actually cause a massive shift in the electoral outcome. Alright, and with all of that, as promised, here's the tried and true method used by political scientists across the country to deal with and make sense of the number of potential surprises that have been happening this year. Your mileage may vary. I'm curious to see what you guys think about this, so be sure to drop some comments down in the comments section. I'm looking forward to reading all of them, responding to a few at the end of the next video. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope you consider liking it and sharing it. And if you're new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for more videos on our endlessly fascinating social world. A huge thank you to the supporters of the channel on Patreon, including Knowing Better, Joel, and Tim Northrup, who were this video's research assistants. I'm especially grateful for their patience as, it's been a while since I was able to make content. Last time we talked about Kanye and whether or not he'd be a spoiler, and spoiler alert, he wasn't, but y'all still had some good thoughts about it, so let's take a look. Aiden O'Leary asked specifically where I got the idea that young black voters as a class would be the ones who would have defected. And while there were definitely individuals who I came across on Reddit and Twitter, including, blue check people on Twitter, I think that this is definitely just a good check, just to make sure that I'm open enough with the sources and actually put examples of this up there so you guys don't think that I'm just attacking a caricature or a straw man or something like that. Like, I'm not in the business of constructing bad arguments and tearing them down just so I can teach you guys social science content. There are lots of people making bad arguments. Basically, I don't have to be inventive. In fact, I could never be as inventive as reality actually is. So I'll be sure to actually post more sources for these kinds of beliefs as I come across them. So your earnest curiosity is actually going to serve to make the videos a little better. So I sincerely appreciate the question. Thank you. So yeah, just piggybacking off the point that Tim wrote about the world moving fast. Fun fact, this wasn't even the first video I filmed in the last 2 months. I've written like 4 scripts, filmed 3 of them, and I was even editing 1. The problem is just so much is happening so quickly, and by the time it's like in the final stages, it's died, it's dead, because there's a whole new issue has come up, and it's just the world has been moving just way too fast for kind of like in-depth political content, just because the number of events that have been happening that require additional in-depth political analysis have just been stockpiling, right? They've just been piling up. So it's been difficult to be able to produce videos at that frequency with everything else going on. But I think I've gotten to a point in the sequencing of future script ideas where I have space to both deal with immediate issues, but also more evergreen ones and things that are dealing with the social sciences beyond the chaos of the current moment. That's all the time that I have for comments in this video. Please keep them coming. I sincerely appreciate all the time you guys take to write down your thoughts. And, seriously, thank you. Sources for everything is always down in the do-we-do, as well as links to the Twitter and the blog. Look forward to seeing you guys out there as well. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you next time.